Hello, everyone, and welcome. So, it's really great to have you here. And I believe we're starting off with a little bit of meditation. So, um, make sure that you're as comfortable as you can be, but also in an upright and alert posture, bringing to mind that now is a time for meditation. And just settling into the body. Welcoming any sensations, whatever they are, connecting with the body and how it is in space, how the body touches your seat and touches the earth, feeling the connection of your feet touching the ground, any sensations there helping to ground you in the present. Opening up and creating space for those feelings to be softly and gently. Allowing the attention to move up the legs with a sense of kindness and welcoming, just sinking in deeper into this present, feeling backs of the legs and the weight of the body through your seat, establishing a sense of groundedness. and connection. Mm, creating space through the hips and the pelvis, allowing for any feelings to exist in that space with a sense of kindness and gentleness. You might need to just take a breath in and a breath out just to help the body soften. Or maybe just a small stretch through the lower back. Softening the area around the diaphragm, inviting the shoulder blades to settle in, the spine just to sit comfortably, one vertebrae on top of the other in a supportive way. Allowing the rib cage to open, any feelings in the chest to have the space they need to just be, and the shoulders to relax. Inviting the throat and the jaw just to soften. Noticing if there's any tension in the base of the skull. Just letting that be. Bringing a sense of gentleness and kindness and gratitude towards all the muscles in our face, around our eyes, our nose, our mouth, for all the work they've done, bringing us information. Now they can just take a rest. And now the body is a bit more settled. You can just notice any pull from the past or the future. Sometimes that can just be a sensation in the body pulling us off into our worries, or bringing up the echoes of the past. Just by turning our mind to that spot gently, we can notice it and invite it to relax. And whatever you're feeling, that's okay. By noticing our feelings with gentleness, we're creating the causes for wisdom. And when you're ready, you can turn your attention to that gentle rhythm of the breath, just noticing what it feels like to be breathing right here, right now. Mindfully knowing the out breath, mindfully knowing the in breath. Bringing a sense of gratitude to the breath for keeping you alive all these years, for always being there. Feeling its soft, soothing care, mindfully knowing the in breath, mindfully knowing the out breath. knowing the out breath from the beginning all the way out to the end, not trying to control it, grab onto it, just seeing it all the way through. Knowing the in breath, whether it's long or short, all the way from its beginning to where it finishes. Allowing the breath to calm you down, settle your mindfulness. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Feeling the pleasantness of the breath as it gently brushes through your mind. the mind wanders off, then allow it to come home, settle in with the soft, tender caring of the breath. As the breath becomes more subtle, you're settling into it more. We come towards the end of the meditation. Ask yourself, how do I feel right now? And inquire into cause and effect. How did I use my mind to create wholesome states? How did I maintain those wholesome states? What were the causes for my mind to become distracted or scattered? And how did I abandon those distractions? We can look into cause and effect at the end of every meditation. And this is how we can grow in wisdom and peace. So bringing the mind into a broader felt sense of the body, feeling the touch of cloth on the skin, the body in the seat, and reorientating ourselves in the room. And finally, we can share any peace, happiness, and goodness in our hearts. That is the merit. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. May all beings realize Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Oh, okay. So I hope everyone had a peaceful and beneficial meditation. So now I guess we can kick off with the Dhamma-Talk. So before I do that, I just thought I'd do a land acknowledgement, which is something we do here in Australia. Here I am on the land of the Dharawal people and pay respects to their elders, past and present, and honour their history, tradition, and spirituality that has been here on these lands for many, many millennia, and invite any of the guardian spirits who are here to join in this Dharma talk and share in our merit. So we can begin. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Asevana cha balanang panditanang cha sevana puja cha pujanyanang etang mangalamuttamang. So that's the traditional way that we might start a Dharma talk, with a little Gata from the Buddha, and a fitting one for the topic today, which is wise inclusion and wise discrimination. So if you don't recognize the Pali, then I'll give us a quick translation. Also, if you are able to turn on your cameras, then I can see that you are really human, so that would be really helpful. Anyway, so yes, that the first lines from the Mangala Sutta, Asevana Chabalanang, which is don't hang out with idiots. Probably not conventionally translated like that, but basically, Asevana Chabalanang, don't hang out with idiots. Associate with the wise or hang out with the wise and honor those worthy of honor. These are great blessings. So I thought that was a fitting way to start for this topic. And so, who is this fool? This is probably one of the things that we need to know. Who are these idiots? Are there really idiots in Buddhism? Um, Also, I thought we need to, kind of see what the Buddha has to say about discrimination and prejudice and kind of what causes it, where does it come from, what's wisdom, what's inclusion, and why is discrimination? And then like how and why is this important right now? So this is kind of the structure I'm hoping to get through in this topic, but we'll just have to see how it goes. So first off, who is the fool? What's the fool? What's the Buddha got to say about fools? So there's a sutta actually called the Fools and the Wise in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's Majjhima Nikaya 129, also known as the Balapandita Sutta. And the Buddha says that a fool thinks poorly, speaks poorly, and acts poorly. So that's how the Buddha defines a fool. And that's how the wise would know who a fool is. And the reason that they're a fool is not just that they do bad deeds, but they also create bad in the future, right? So they're creating, like, they'll have a bad reputation. They're creating, like, unwholesome conditions for themselves now. And it's also going to be leading to, like, a bad rebirth. So, what kinds of things, how are they winding up in this place? What are they doing? What's the fool doing? Now, specifically within this context, it's like thinking about, I thought, it's really interesting to think about this within the context of the 4 kinds of unwholesome speech, for example, right? So because a foolish person thinks poorly, they speak poorly, and they act poorly, right? So I guess first we look at how they think poorly. They'll think poorly because their values are based wrongly, right? So when we think that the only thing that's important to us is getting ahead, getting more stuffs, and beating everyone else, being the king of the world, maybe, then that's where we're going to fall into wrong kinds of thinking, right? And when it comes to getting ahead and becoming the king of the world, then it's probably going to be based around things like control. And so then, like, because our values are off, we're going to be quite happy to speak wrong as well, right? We're going to be using like misinformation, right? Lies. Lies are really great if we want to manipulate people, if we want to get ahead, if we want to have power and control. That's why we do it. We want people to think better of us. We don't want people to think badly of us, right? Divisive speech. This is so common these days, right? Bit of a warning, we are going to get into the doom. So I do apologize. But hopefully we'll also come up with some ways with living through the doom at the moment as well. So yeah, the divisive speech. It's like, setting people apart and saying these people are like this and these people are like this, right? And dividing people up into small and smaller sections. So divisive speech, harsh speech, right? It's the speech that isn't about like getting to a level of understanding. It's about proving that I'm right. at all costs, and disinformation. And there's so much disinformation, and we can see this. I think like this is so much part of the overwhelm that a lot of people are kind of experiencing. I was talking to people today who came for Dana, and they were saying, look, I'm just feeling so overwhelmed. I want to be engaged in the world. I want to know what's going on. Um, but at the end of the day, it's just exhausting, and I don't, I have to look away as well. And I think, look, this overloading of information and like the low quality of information we're being fed is like so problematic, and creating this. And I think it's really intentional for these people who are trying to distribute, who are distributing this. It's not by accident that every single morning we wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, what's going on in the world today, right? So we have to be really aware of like the quality of information that we're kind of being given as well, right? um and how this kind of divides us and sets us apart. So I thought I'd also look at kind of how then, this information that we're being given kind of creates these prejudices and discrimination. And so I looked up, how the Buddha defined like prejudice in the suttas, and he spoke about it as making decisions prejudiced by favoritism, hostility, stupidity, and cowardice, right? So we might know these better within like the Buddhist context as like greed, hatred, and delusion. And delusion, like I think delusion is not really that particularly well understood. And so that's the definition around stupidity and cowardiceness or fear. Right? So delusion is the active force that wants to turn away and not look at the thing, right? And not want to see things clearly. So that can be problematic, because when we don't want to look at things and when we don't want to see things clearly, then it's very easy to believe whatever like surface information that we're fed, right? So when we're feeling overwhelmed, we might actually like just be reading things online and be skimming just the headlines, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm staying involved, I'm staying in the know, I'm reading all the headlines. But like, if all our minds can process is these little like, what is it, like 100-character little headlines, then we're really not getting all the information. We're not really not investigating. We're really not kind of looking in to what's going on. And we're actually training our minds in a lack of attention, right? I noticed this the other day. I was looking through some stuff online and saw a headline. I was like, oh, that's so right. And then I didn't want to click through and actually read the article, but I did want to share it. And that was really interesting to notice that in my mind. I was like, oh yeah, that's so right. I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, like how are we training our minds? How are we doing this? Like sometimes, if you're on like YouTube Shorts or Instagram or whatever your little doom scroll of whatever it is, um, do you even make it to the end of that person who's saying that really good thing before you hit the like? Or is it like, oh yeah, no, they're so right. And it's like, oh, but you don't even quite make it to the end of what they're saying. Like our attention spans are getting so short, and actually training our minds to want to know is really important. And this liking, this very quick jumping to conclusions about what we like and what we don't like, right? It's like, oh, we see the clip, and if the headline isn't one we agree with, we just keep scrolling until we find something we do like, right? Um And this is a form of like discrimination in our minds. We're not even like giving ourselves like the whole picture. Ajahn Brahm talks about like getting to know and see things better, because he gives this simile of like, when he was driving back to the monastery every day, and he'd see the same road every single day coming up the road to the monastery, and he'd see it flashing by in the car. And so he thought he knew what the road to the monastery looked like, but he had some time. And so he said to his driver, look, I'm going to just walk back. I've got plenty of time and it's a nice sunny day. And so he got out the car and he started walking back to the monastery. And all of a sudden the monastery looked different because he had a bit more time to notice all the different features. And it was so beautiful that he actually stopped to see even more details. So this is kind of what we're missing out on. We're missing out on the kind of juicy bits of life by jumping to these decisions. And like jumping to these decisions is part of what discrimination is. So in the Buddha's teaching, we have 3 kinds of discrimination, or 3 kinds of conceit, right? So you might have heard it as the 3 kinds of conceit. I'm better, I'm worse, or I'm the same. Right. And this is so much of what the internet culture is these days, right? It's like, boom, we're going to hit the like, is kind of like, this is good enough, or scroll because I don't want to know, or like we resonate with these people. These are our people, right? These are the same. Like the I'm the same thing it's a bit more kind of random. You don't really think about that in terms of a conceit. But it's like, oh yeah, these people are my people. These people are the people that I resonate with. These are the people that have the same hashtags as me, right? This is going to be quite a nerdy kind of talk, I think. um, and so this is how kind of discrimination happens, right? And actually the realization of not seeing that there's any I'm better, I'm worse, or I'm the same is how people would come to the Buddha and explain that they were enlightened. That was their realization of no self. So this filtering and recognizing is just a natural process of our minds, right? But we have to bring some wisdom to be able to see how it's happening, right? Because otherwise, like, what's happening is like we're creating tribes and leaving everyone else outside. And without gathering that information, then this is how this separation occurs, right? This is how we can be led to believe that immigrants are like this, certain ethnicities are like this, trans people are like this, queer people are like this, disabled people, autistic people, whoever the scapegoat of the hour is. So, and then these people can become like the subjects of debate. They can be, separated out. And it's like, they can become like a commodity then, right? Whatever's different from us is just a commodity to be sold and bargained with and like used for fodder in a culture where we've gone even from like before we were in a culture where it was like he or she or they, whoever has the most stuffs wins. But we've gone even further down the rabbit hole. We have got to the point of the person who has the most likes wins. Right? It's not even the person who speaks the most truth, the person who speaks the person who speaks the best. It's the person who can get the best 10-second soundbite into your brain and you can hit like. And this is a pretty kind of sad place for us to be in. And this is kind of the culture which gave rise to people like Charlie Kirk, right? That's what this person, he was quite happy to debate people because he was looking for those sound bites. He was looking to win. He wasn't looking to, and we see this not just with Charlie Kirk, but any, like a lot of discussion and debate that we see in like the 24-hour news cycle, in the, in those YouTube things, in the podcast things. It's people who are not actually looking to test out their thought structures and understand other people's opinions, but they're trying to dominate. They're trying to do the I'm better and you're worse, right? And so it's like being really aware of how these things work and whether we're actually like fueling that and creating that in our minds, or, like, how do we value information? How do we value communication? And so for us as well, it's, we should wisely discriminate then, right? Do we pay attention to these kinds of things, or do we value things that are long form information, right? I've noticed this in my mind over the past few years, right? If I see someone write a reply that's like this long in a forum or something like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to read through the whole thing. Maybe I can just like copy and paste it, summarize it in Chat GPT, and get the top three key points, right? Like, I know people who do this. It's like, I don't want to read a whole sutta. I'm just going to paste it into Chat GPT and get it to digest the sutta and tell me what it's about. And like, we're devaluing our own brains. What are we doing to ourselves? My goodness. Um, and I noticed this in myself. So I really set myself the challenge to be like, okay, look, I'm going to read a certain amount of long form information every single day. And I'm going to try and write in a long form way every day as well, right? Because otherwise we're so used to getting everything in our 256 characters of information, sending our text messages, sending our WhatsApp messages. And like, then it like those tiny little bites, they're little commodities. They're not textured. They don't have all the richness and beauty and creativity and diversity of what makes us human. And that's sad. So using our discernment to pay attention to the things that are worthwhile and the things that are beautiful. And also calling out fools. Like, I think there's this culture in Buddhism, there's this understanding, maybe in just in Western Buddhism, but I think just generally in Buddhism, that everyone's welcome. We're just going to give them another chance, and there's no such thing as fools. So this is why I really wanted to highlight that there are definitely fools, right? And the Buddhists had no problems in calling them out. When someone did something wrong in the Vinaya, and he'd call them in front and be like, "You foolish monk," right? He'd have no problems with saying this. And so, like, calling out that there are things that we should not pay attention to. And actually in the Anguttara Threes, there's the Buddha says there are like three kinds of people found in the world. What three? There's the person who you should be disgusted by, and you should not associate with, accompany, or attend to. There's the person you should regard with equanimity, and you shouldn't associate with, accompany, or attend to. And the third kind of person is, there is a person you should associate with, accompany, and attend to. So the first kind of person, disgusted is a really strong word, right? But the Buddha says, like, this kind of person, just by hanging around with them, even if you don't behave in the ways that they behave, their reputation will rub off on you, right? You hang out with like bandits, everyone's going to think you're like a robber, a bandit, or a thief, right? And so that's going to rub off on you. The second kind of person, the person we should regard with equanimity. It's the kind of person who can become like easily irritated, who can easily fall into like these hostility and things like this, right? The Buddha says it's like when you poke a sewage pit, it's going to stink, right? You poke it and it's going to smell like shit. So that's why you got to keep your distance from the sewage pit. So no problems. And then the person that we should associate with, accompany and attend to, right? These are the ones that like have a good fragrance. They're going to rub off on us. They're the ones that are going to help us grow in our wholesome qualities on the spiritual path. So using wise discrimination to know which one is which, right? And so like, how do we know who are the wise people? Just in that same sutta, in the Bala Pandita Sutta, it says like the wise are to be known by their thoughts, their speech, and their action. The wise, they know what is wholesome and what leads to the wholesome. And so this is the same thing for us, right? We can reflect and be like, okay, what's wholesome and what is leading to the wholesome? And of course, the ultimate wise people are the noble ones, right? The arahants. I mean, the Buddha was the most ultimate of wise people. And then like the arahants and the other noble disciples of the Buddha. And the reason that they are the wise people, or at least one of the reasons, is that they have fully understood karma. So that's like cause and effect. And so they know that their actions have results, that they flow out. They have results on themselves, they have results for their reputation, they have results for the people that they associate with. They have an impact on the relationships that they're in. And so then they think well, they speak well, and they act well, right? Or if we kind of, the translation before for like they think poorly, act poorly, and speak poorly. We could even say they have a wealth in their thoughts, they have a wealth in their speech, and they have a wealth in their actions. Isn't that a beautiful thing, like to be accumulating those kind of wealth, right? And so based in the values of goodness, right? No, wanting to create wholesomeness in our lives, to know what's wholesome and know that our actions have consequences. And then maybe we like realize that instead of getting ahead, getting the most likes, getting the most stuffs, that our relationships do matter, that our heart qualities matter, that generosity matters, that love matters, and that inclusion matters, right? Bringing people in and being around people who are good and creating goodness in the world. All right, so our values condition our thoughts, and our thoughts condition our speech and our actions, right? So, yeah, this comes back then to what kind of information are we going to share? How much are we going to share, right? Like that overwhelm, coming back to like me wanting to share the headline, wanting to share the news article, but feeling too overwhelmed to actually want to read it. I'm like, well, if I'm feeling overwhelmed right now by this kind of news, are my friends going to want to read this? Are the people who are following me on Blue Sky going to want to read this? Probably not. Let's like use a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of discernment here, and maybe just skip on by that whole idea. Intentionally choosing what we're going to pay attention to and how much we're going to pay attention to, right? Because like the world's pretty crazy out there right now. There's a whole lot of doom, and there's only so much doom you can take in at once. Like, it's really important to care. We don't want to be like going off into our little, not caring world. That's also a problem. But the overwhelm we can feel when we like, care too much, like compassion fatigue, I think is what it's called, right? So knowing that we have to dip in and dip out. Just asking, do we need to share that thing? Is it a reliable source if we're going to share it, right? Because there's so much that the misinformation and disinformation that's out there is huge. And if we're not sure, just looking into it, right? Into the kind of things that are divisive topics at the moment. Is it, it's not hard to go and look at how the immigration rates have affected employment, for example. And we can see, there's been this story in Australian news at the moment. I know immigration is like a big thing all over the world as our resources become more scarce, that immigration has increased by like 500% or something like this, right? And it's actually, when you look at the statistics, they found out that actually immigration in Australia is going down at the moment. It's not actually that high. And it's not that hard to go, what's the rate of immigration? You type it into a search engine, it gives you the answer. Probably one of those horrible AI machines could do the same. Just checking in on the sources for these things. Where did this information come from? What's the history from it? There's all sorts of places where we're kind of being, just fed information and we're not even questioning it. So just like taking a second to see, is this actually true? And presenting, like, then if we're going to share it, like sharing it in a way that makes it adds value. Yeah, if we're going to tell people, talk to our friends about it, how can we talk and say, look, I read this thing and this is how it was beneficial to me, because that's like uplifting our hearts. It's creating that gentleness. Is it the right time to share it as well, right? Is it the right time to be discussing these things? And, how can we get sources that are inclusive? How can we like make sure that when we're trying to understand the issues that affect, like if we're hearing stories about immigrants, then maybe we want to have like some immigrant voices in our news feed or in our social media feed. If we were interested, in disability issue, broadening out those scope of things, having trans people in our news feed, having people, who speak from neurodiverse backgrounds in our news feeds, and having those inclusive voices in our lives, and having the stories from the people who are actually affected, right? Because it gives us a totally different perspective. Once we know these people, it brings back the humanity to who they are. And so valuing these things, valuing diversity, valuing inclusion. And the Buddha even defined inclusion with a Pali word as sangaha as giving kindly words, taking care, and equality. So that openness, that generosity, that giving, the kind speech. So I think we've gone through a lot of different kinds of kind speech. The best kind of kind speech is the Dhamma. So if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, maybe sharing a Dhammapada verse. I've been doing a lot of that lately. I've been finding some really lovely Dhammapada verses and sharing them just to uplift people's hearts. Dhammapada verses are actually great because they're tiny little bite-sized information. When our brains are overwhelmed, we can still take in 4 lines of Dhammapada. Instead of going for the doom scroll, go for the Dhammapada scroll. Have it loaded up in a little bookmark on your phone or something like that, and scroll a few verses of Dhammapada and just like mainline that instead. Taking care, right? Establishing a willingness to engage, right? Our willingness to engage, our willingness to know. And it's so hard because all that misinformation, all that stuff that's being fired at us, it's trying to get us to not engage. It's trying to get us to feel like we're powerless and we have no way of, it's like a lot of people are like, what can I do? What we can do is make good choices, right? And the Buddha gives us like this framework just in the 5 precepts even. Like that's a lot. Just by keeping the 5 precepts, we're doing so much. We're making so many good choices. And This is the whole thing with the 5 precepts, is that they are choices, right? They're not commandments from above. I undertake this training. Have, these values are important to me, so I value life, so I undertake the training to refrain from killing living beings. I value truth. I undertake the training to refrain from false speech. I, value people's relationships. So I undertake the training to refrain from sexual misconduct. I value clarity of mind. So I undertake the training to refrain from intoxicants which dull the mind and lead to carelessness. All these things, it's that willingness to engage. And the fourth aspect of Sangaha, which is equality, treating one another as their equal, getting to know people. I mean, it's easiest when we already know they are, when someone looks like us, right? It's really easy to do that. But having that curiosity of mind to actually treat people as their equal, treat people as respect, because instead then we're caring, right? Rather than controlling, we're caring. And this is the difference, right? This is the value, where our values shift and how that influences our actions. And so this is something then that can be like, that's a way of practicing right livelihood, whatever we're doing. And so yeah, seeing that, like flipping from that conceit then to seeing the humanity and the diversity and the people around us, and getting to know and opening up our minds to the different ways people can be. And so what this is doing then is creating a context for us to be where we can when we can feel safer, right? Because the people who we thought were scary are not scary anymore, because we've got to know them. We've got to know their perspectives, right? And so by doing this, we're undermining the rhetoric around division and harmful discrimination, right? We're tuning out those harmful voices. We're tuning out a lot of that overwhelm, that thing that separates us from the other. And knowing kind of when we can also speak up, right? Because not everyone in every situation has the same level of privilege and the same level of power as well, right? So knowing that, we might be able to speak up for other people in a situation where, because of who we are, our position in society, our ability, our skin color, whatever it is, we can also be that person who spreads the right kinds of information, who helps to bring other people in, and being really aware that that changes in our different situations where we are. We might be someone who at work is in quite a powerful position, but in another situation we're not, right? There was a whole lot of discussion at the beginning of this series with Bhante Sujata, where he was talking about misogyny and patriarchy and how that works and how that power kind of distributes unevenly. So really being aware of that in terms of how discrimination works as well. And, looking into the cause and effect that leads to us making the right kinds of choices. Seeing how, just by reflecting back, say, like on keeping the precepts and seeing how that goodness feels, right? It's like, oh, there is something I can do, right? I can make at least that many good choices just by choosing to keep the 5 precepts. And then it's a beautiful feeling, just looking at our acts of generosity and seeing that, yes, we did actually have a choice there. Looking at those times when we've done something kind, when we've been inclusive, and remembering that at the end of the day, reflecting back, and then we can feel a lot less overwhelmed for how, where we are in the world and how the world's going, because we've got a meaning for ourselves that we've created for ourselves. And also in all this overwhelm, knowing when it's time to take time out. When the little low power mode has come up on your life, Right? We'll notice like the little note. You know, those people who are like always plugging their phones into charge because they're worried it's going to go low. But they're also the people who are like totally scrambled. So notice when your little low power mode light has come on and be like, okay, I just have to plug myself in for 5 minutes. Right? Making sure that we really do check in with our own hearts and know when we've had enough, right? Know when we have to just dip out and look after ourselves. Know when we've overloaded our senses too much with too many flashing things and pretty rewards. And we've got this beautiful teaching of the Dhamma. We've got the beautiful meditation practice that we do. Even just taking a few minutes just to settle ourselves down, whether it's through doing walking meditation, grounding ourselves in the body, or taking a little bit longer and doing some breath meditation or metta meditation, whatever works for you. And so this is the way that we can recharge our batteries, and so that we can keep going in this world which is just so hectic. So it's through ethics, reflection, wise association, and stillness that we can develop wisdom, so that we can engage in the world in meaningful ways, knowing the right amount. And so there's like this lovely sutta in the Satipatthana Samyutta called the Acrobat. And it's a story of an acrobat and the apprentice. And the apprentice, she's up on the top of this pole balancing and doing these tricks and having this discussion with her master. And they're trying to decide. The master says, you look after me and I look after you, and we'll get our fee and the people will clap and we'll go home safely. And the apprentice is like, no, actually, I'll look after me, you look after you, we'll do our tricks, the people will be happy, and we'll get our money and we'll go home and everything will be good. And so they have this kind of like debate, and they go to the Buddha and they say, like, who's right? And the Buddha says, you're both right, right? You wouldn't have thought this, but so the Buddha gives this simile. By protecting oneself, we use our mindfulness. Like it's by protecting ourselves, we protect others. And this is through cultivating the 4 foundations of mindfulness, right? So by protecting our mind, we're able to protect others. We're not going to fall into those dangerous behaviors. We're not going to fall into those harmful behaviors. So by protecting ourselves, by cultivating our mindfulness, we're protecting others. And by patience, harmlessness, loving kindness, and sympathy, we protect ourselves, protect others by protecting ourselves as well, right? So you can see how those 2 things look after each other. And so these are really ways that we can honor the things that are worthy of honor, right? Mindfulness is worthy of honor, and loving kindness is worthy of honor. And so these, going back to that first verse, it's not associating with the fools, associating with the wise, and honoring those things that are worthy of honor: peace, kindness, gentleness. So I just wanted to finish with one of my favorite little sayings from the Buddha at the moment. It's from one of my favorite suttas. It's the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta. And this is the advice from the Buddha, which is, do not neglect wisdom, preserve truth, foster generosity, and train only for peace. So I offer this for your reflection, and we can open up for questions. Okay.
There is one question in the chat, Venerable.
Okay, thank you, Manori. Let me see. Okay, so the question says, so another kind of Othering is not associating or liking or associating with people with prejudicial attitudes. So can you say something about that balance between speaking out against non-inclusive attitudes, but still being against the bigots, anti-immigrants, and whoever is, and whoever? It's tricky sometimes. Right? It really is tricky sometimes. So it is tricky. It is tricky. So first, like not hanging out with them, not letting their stink rub off on us is important. And what that is not taking on those views, right? So that's the association. It's like when we associate too much, we start taking on those views. So that's the kind of discrimination that we definitely need to be doing. Um, we only have a certain amount of charge in our battery for speaking up. So also that's another kind of discrimination we need to do. We need to know how much charge we have in our battery to be able to speak up. And so, and knowing at different points in time, like this is the thing I can say yes to, and this is the thing I can say no to, and this is the thing I can engage in. And maybe there's like one issue that's really important to you at this point in time, and that's what you're able to give your energy to. So I think, that would be my advice to that. And bringing people, like the Buddha says that you should teach virtue to people who are interested in virtue. You should teach wisdom to people who are interested in wisdom, and you should teach like stillness or meditation to people who are interested in meditation, right? So the people, we're not like a proselytizing religion. We speak to people who are already interested in goodness, because it's really hard to change our own minds, and it's even harder to change someone else's minds, right? So it might be that our friends have like some funny ideas, or they just haven't looked into things, and they're the kind of people that we can kind of gently share the right kinds of information with. Getting into fights with trolls, we know this is just a competition for likes. Don't waste your time. Sharing the information amongst people who are good is good. Creating community, creating strength, and creating belonging for people is going to go a lot better to keeping ourselves and the world safe, I think, at least in my understanding. Okay. So, oh, here we go. Another one. Thank you, Venerable. I found out that reducing my internet use, deleting my social media, and scrolling has really improved my peace of mind. How do monastics interact online? How much do you read the news? It really varies. People want to talk to me a little bit about what's going on. So I, yeah, I do read a little bit of the news. Again, like the hardest thing for me is like actually clicking through the headlines and reading the actual articles, because I realize like otherwise I'm really not engaging with the news anyway. Just seeing the headlines isn't really kind of understanding the core principles behind what's going on. And I think for me, if I'm going to be reading these things and I'm going to be engaging, then I want to know, like, if I want to know, then I actually want to know. Um, Rather than just like getting those little dopamine hits of news headlines. And I think then it's going to be about quality rather than quantity. So you're going to have to just pay attention to how your own heart is feeling on that day, right? There are days where you just read something and your heart just sinks and you need to do something else. You need people in your life. You just need to have like a real human interaction or something like that. Real human interactions are a really good antidote to like the world out there becoming too overwhelming. So balancing those two things out. It's hard. So much of our lives and our communities are online these days. And, if you're part of a minority community, right? If you're engaging in kind of disability culture or LGBTQ stuff or something, you might not have those kind of people in your everyday life. So you are going to be online, but also making sure that you're doing things that are embodied, doing things that are with real people. Those kind of things can help balance that out. Okay, question. Could you please explain more about the second type of person that we should act with equanimity towards? So what does it mean about acting with equanimity? Should we still hang out with them? The Buddha says we should not attend on them, should not hang around them. And I think this is the kind of person where there's a saying which is like, love the tiger at a distance. So this might be someone who has hurt us. And so we just need to give them some distance, or we know that they're like the kind of person who's easily provoked or something like that. And so, like, equanimity is one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, the 4 ways of loving, right? But sometimes we have to have that distance to be able to be okay with them, right? It's not that we're disgusted with them. That was the first person. The second person, it's like by having that distance and that separation between them, then we can feel okay about that, right? So it's not, it's not that by having that distance, they're not going to be causing us any of that harm. And that's why the Buddha then would say, I guess, that we shouldn't associate with them. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that helps. Anyone else? Okay. Well, I can't see any more questions in the chat. I can't see any more hands waving around. So, oh, here we go. Look. uh, Okay, so this comment from Moo. Really appreciate the reminder to uplift people's minds. I'm someone who does share on issues that are quite distressing. Whoop, the chat's running away. I remember watching a video short from Venerable Ani Thubden Detchen advocating for disability justice, and it was a great example of uplifting on a challenging topic, right? So we can choose how we're going to share things. I think that's a really wonderful point. Thank you. Moo. Okay. How can irritable people like me hope to improve if nicer people won't mix with us? I think if you're here, you're probably not as bad as you think. And we're probably like irritable. I think often we can be irritable because we're on like low power mode. We're all in the yellow zone, right? And when we've had a good rest, when we've recharged our minds, when we've had some good food, when we've cuddled a teddy bear, or, you know, whatever it is, when we've recharged and we're in that comfortable place, we've read some inspiring, uplifting things, listened to a good Dhamma talk, then we can be, we can be in a place where we can be around those good people. And it might start with just associating with good people online through watching Dhamma talks and through listening to Dhamma things, maybe going to a meditation group, or just, and that's associating with people without even talking. And we're just recharging our goodness battery and lowering our irritability, and being aware that we are an irritable person. We're already got that much wisdom, right? And then looking into cause and effect. What causes me to be irritable? What causes me to be distracted? Those kind of things can be, and then because we know that we're like an irritable person, then we can start putting in different conditions. Like, okay, so that point in time when I got really irritated, that was a condition phenomena. What led to that condition happening, right? Like this, if someone else who I really liked had said that thing to me, I wouldn't have got irritated. So having some wisdom that goes into those conditions, and then programming our mindfulness so that when we're in a similar situation next time, we're going to react differently, right? And so that's using our wisdom and discernment to change the way that we approach our situations. And then hopefully you have some wonderful, kind people around you like you do tonight. Okay. May we all be blessed with good people for many lifetimes until we realize nirvana. Okay, so I'm going to hand back over to Minori for now to do the wrap up.